Russia never expected it, not here, not in the frozen heart of the Arctic, where temperatures drop to -40 and the horizon is nothing but endless white silence. Yet, in this desolate wilderness, a new kind of confrontation was taking shape. American Marines, trained for tropical storms and desert heat, were now moving across the ice like silent predators, their breath freezing in the wind as they executed one of the most secretive military operations ever conducted near the top of the world. For decades, Russia ruled these frozen frontiers. Its northern fleet prowled beneath the polar ice, and its radar stations watched over the Arctic Circle like guardians of a forgotten empire. But that dominance was about to be challenged, not by a fleet, not by a missile, but by the United States Marines. And what followed would shake every assumption Russia ever held about warfare in the coldest corner of the planet. This isn't fiction, it's a glimpse into a real, unfolding race for control over the Arctic's hidden riches and strategic routes. Stay with us as we explore how America's Marines prepared to confront Russia in the world's last true frontier, the frozen Arctic. The ice awakens. The Arctic didn't sleep. It watched. Beneath its miles of ancient ice, pressure built like a heartbeat trapped in frozen veins. A pale moon bled light over the endless white, turning shadows into silent witnesses. And in that pale glow, movement began, slow, deliberate, and unseen by the world below. The 75th parallel. A convoy of American aircraft sliced through the night, their engines whispering against the frozen air. Inside one of them, a group of U.S. Marines sat in silence, faces hidden behind frost masks, eyes locked on the blue glow of navigation screens. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. They were heading where no Marine unit had deployed before, into the icy crown of the world. A place ruled not by armies, but by the cold itself. Outside, the radar operator whispered, "Crossing into blackout zone." Now. And just like that, they vanished. The Arctic had always been Russia's kingdom, vast, frozen, unchallenged. The Kremlin's northern fleet called it their fortress of steel and ice. Nuclear submarines prowled beneath the ice caps like sharks under glass. Air defense grids sat quietly on isolated islands, each radar pulse covering 1,000 miles of nothingness. No one dared to test their reach. Until now, the Marines' transport tilted gently, descending toward an unmarked plateau. The mission was so classified it barely existed on paper. Their goal: establish a forward observation post to steady Russian Arctic defenses, to prove that America could reach even here, where maps and compasses spin wild as the aircraft's rear ramp opened. A burst of air colder than death filled the hold. Snow whipped in, sharp as glass. One by one, the Marines stepped into the storm, skis strapped to their boots, packs on their backs. Their boots sank into snow so fine it hissed. They were ghosts now, swallowed by the white. Miles away, a Russian radar operator sipped tea in a cabin that shook with wind. His monitors flickered. For a fraction of a second, one blip appeared where no blip should be. Then it was gone. He frowned, leaned closer, adjusted the sensitivity, and saw only noise, electromagnetic snow. He shrugged, unaware that far beyond his window, the United States had just stepped onto Russia's frozen doorstep. Hours passed. The Marines moved wordlessly through valleys sculpted by wind. The cold pressed against their lungs like steel. One wrong step, one wrong breath, and frostbite could claim fingers before dawn. Yet they pushed forward, driven by training and something else, the weight of history. At their front moved Captain Ryan Mercer, 38, a veteran of desert wars now walking on alien ground. His voice came through the headset like gravel. Eyes up. Region 200. They reached it before the sun, though the sun here was a rumor, a smear of gold that never rose, never set. From that ridge, they saw it, a faint orange glow on the horizon. Not dawn, not fire. A Russian outpost, small but alive, its generators humming beneath a dome of ice. Mercer knelt. There it is, the bear's first footprint. The team unpacked their gear, compact radar reflectors, portable sensors, encrypted comms, all wrapped in white. Their job wasn't to attack. It was to understand. To map the invisible web of Russian surveillance that blanketed the north. Every frequency they caught, every signal logged, would tell the Pentagon what Russia could see and what it couldn't. But something was off. A strange static filled their earpieces, not random, but rhythmic. Private Alvarez frowned. "Captain, I'm picking up something that's not weather. It's..." The signal pulsed again. Then a voice crackled through the noise, a voice speaking English, distorted but clear. "You're far from home, Marines." The air froze harder than the ground beneath them. No one spoke. The voice repeated, calm, almost amused. The Arctic doesn't welcome strangers. The signal died. Silence followed. Only the wind spoke, screaming across the ice as if the earth itself had heard. Mercer turned slowly, scanning the horizon. Pack it up. We move, now. They moved fast, dragging sleds, erasing tracks, retreating deeper into the white. Behind them, the orange glow of the Russian post flickered, then dimmed, as if it too was watching them leave. Hours later, as the Arctic twilight returned, a shadow crossed the sky. It wasn't a storm. It was man-made. A Russian reconnaissance drone drifted overhead, sensors gleaming in the low light. Its thermal camera swept the landscape, searching. The Marines froze in place, bodies pressed flat against the snow. Breath held, heartbeats pounding. The drone passed once, twice, then vanished into the mist. When they finally moved again, the wind had shifted, and with it, their luck. One of the sleds, heavy with equipment, hit a wheat crust and plunged through. The sound, that sharp, wet crack, tore through the silence. Mercer dropped to his knees, gripping the line. The ice groaned beneath him, stretching like fabric about to rip. Cut it, Alvarez hissed. Negative, Mercer muttered. That gear is the mission. Another crack. The sled sank another inch. The water below glittered like black glass. Mercer reached for the harness, frost gathering on his lash. On my count. 3, 2. The ice split like lightning. The sled dropped. The rope snapped. A rush of freezing vapor erupted. For a heartbeat, the Arctic swallowed the mission whole. When it was over, all that remained was the sound of wind. The Marines stood motionless, staring into the hole that had consumed their comm gear, their lifeline to the outside world. The mission hadn't failed yet, but it was now cut off, stranded, and exposed. Captain Mercer exhaled slowly. We're deaf. The Arctic didn't respond. It never did. But far beyond their sight, deep under the ice, something else stirred, a Russian submarine adjusting course, its sonar picking up faint disturbances in the ice shelf. To the crew below, it sounded like movement. Human movement. Above the ice, the Marines regrouped in silence. They would need a new plan. Their mission to observe might have just turned into one to survive. And as the Aurora opened the sky in rivers of green light, one truth became clear. This confrontation was no longer theoretical. The Arctic, silent for centuries, was about to roar. The silent hunt against the Arctic wind had a voice that never repeated itself. It whispered, it screamed, and sometimes it just breathed, a long, endless exhale that reminded men how small they truly were. By dawn, that voice had grown restless, rolling across the plateau where the Marines regrouped, as if warning them they no longer belonged here. Captain Ryan Mercer's gloved hands traced the edge of a map sealed under frost-proof plastic. The map was old, drawn when most of this ice was unexplored. Now, the ice had changed, the terrain had shifted, and the enemy wasn't standing still either. Mercer knew one thing: they couldn't turn back. Not yet. The radio equipment was gone, sunk into black water miles behind them. Their only remaining lifeline was a backup encrypted beacon buried in one of the sleds, a device that could ping an orbiting satellite once every 12 hours. Until then, they were ghosts in enemy territory, unseen and unheard. The men formed a tight circle as Mercer spoke. His voice was rough but steady. We've lost comms, but we still have a job. We'll move east, get closer to the ridge near the Russian weather station. If their sensors are active, we'll know by what we feel before what we see. Corporal Hensley squinted into the distance. And if they find us first? Mercer zipped his collar, eyes on the horizon. Then this becomes a different kind of mission. The sky above them burned pale blue, fractured by ribbons of green aurora. Beneath that alien glow, the Marines moved again, single file, deliberate, like shadows carved from snow. Their boots left shallow impressions that the wind erased almost instantly. Even here, stealth wasn't about silence. It was about vanishing. 3 hours into the march, Alvarez, the youngest of the unit, froze mid-step. His glove went up. Everyone halted. A faint buzz came from above the wind, distant, mechanical. A drone. They dropped into the snow, hearts hammering. The sound drew closer, a low hum like an electric wasp skimming the horizon. Mercer peered through his monocular. The shape emerged through the mist, a quadrotor reconnaissance drone, Russian markings faint on its side, nose mounted with an infrared lens. It wasn't scanning randomly. It was tracking, static mode. Mercer whispered. They went still. Breath vanished in plumes of ice. Every second stretched like glass about to crack. The drone swept overhead once, twice, then paused, Hovering. Alvarez whispered, "Sir, it's got us." Mercer didn't move. His hand crept toward a pouch at his side and withdrew a small device, a signal jammer the size of a book. He switched it on, its internal circuits emitting a pulse too faint for human ears but enough to confuse a drone's short-range sensors. The machine hesitated midair, its stabilization algorithm stumbling. For a split second, its altitude dropped, then recovered, then jerked upward again. It spun once, its camera searching. Then, like a ghost losing interest, it turned and drifted back into the mist. The Marine stayed still for another minute, then another. When Mercer finally gave the order to move, his voice came low. "They're watching this grid. That drone wasn't random. Recon sweep?" Hensley asked. Mercer shook his head. "No, it was following a signal." The men exchanged glances. The realization settled heavy. The Russians had detected the lost comms unit that sank beneath the ice. They were looking for whoever it belonged to. Hours later, they reached higher ground, a ridge carved from black stone where the wind shrieked through narrow cuts like a flute. From up here, the view was infinite, glaciers stretching to the horizon, the faint shimmer of the Barents Sea beyond, and, farther still, the dim orange flicker of Russian base lights buried under domes of reinforced glass. Hensley unpacked a portable sensor grid and pressed it into the snow. The data streamed onto a small screen strapped to Mercer's wrist. Reading multiple M-bands, Hensley muttered. "Weather stations not just broadcasting forecasts. They're pushing encrypted bursts every few minutes, short, sharp, then quiet again." "Military traffic," Mercer said. "They're using civilian cover." Behind him, Alvarez shivered, watching the northern lights ripple above. "Sir, we're deep in their range. If we're caught..." Mercer turned, his eyes sharp under the frost. "We won't be caught. The Arctic favors the ones who move with it, not against it." He said it like a promise, or a warning. By nightfall, the temperature dropped below -50. The cold turned their breath into small storms. They built a camp hidden in the shadow of a ridge, a patch of relative safety surrounded by nothingness. The small heater hummed, barely fighting the wind. The men sat close, silent. Then came a sound no one expected, faint, rhythmic thuds echoing through the ice. Hensley's hand went to his weapon. "What the hell is that?" Mercer raised his hand. "Listen." Thud. Pause. Thud. It wasn't footsteps. It was mechanical. Deep, slow, consistent. The kind of vibration that traveled through frozen ground from something massive moving beneath it. "Subsurface," Mercer whispered. "Something under the ice." Alvarez's eyes widened. "A submarine." "Too shallow for that," Mercer said. "Could be a board drill. Or a crawler." The thuds grew fainter. Then they stopped altogether. Silence reclaimed the world. That night, Mercer barely slept. His thoughts circled around what they'd heard. Russia had been experimenting with autonomous Arctic crawlers, hybrid vehicles designed to patrol under thin ice and relay data to satellites. If one had detected seismic disturbance near their landing zone, it meant Russian command knew something was happening. The Marines weren't just being hunted. They were being triangulated. By morning, the storm hit. White swallowed the world. Visibility dropped to 10 feet. The wind howled so loud it erased their own voices. Progress became impossible. They huddled in thermal tents, each gust shaking the fabric like thunder. Then the signal came. A faint, low beep from Mercer's wrist beacon. The encrypted backup device had connected to the satellite. He had one chance to send a coded pulse back to command. A burst no longer than 5 seconds. He typed fast, gloves stiff with frost. "Eagle active. Contact possible. Location compromised." He hit transmit. The screen blinked once, then twice. Then went dark. Connection lost. For a moment, Mercer thought the transmission had failed, until a tone cut through the static, sharp and deliberate. It wasn't from their beacon. It was from somewhere outside the tent. A second tone followed, different pitch. Then another. 3 tones. Short, short, long. Morse code. Hensley ripped open the tent flap, snow bursting in. "Someone's signaling us." They stumbled outside into the storm, goggles blurring, heads whipping side to side. The wind made every sound twist. Then, through the white, they saw it, a faint orange flare burning against the wind, half a mile away. Mercer's mind raced. No American unit was near enough to reach them. No friendly beacon could burn in this weather. Whoever was out there wanted to be seen, or to bait them. "Captain," Alvarez shouted. "Orders." Mercer stared into the storm, where the flare flickered like a heartbeat dying slow. "We find out who sent it," he said quietly. They packed fast, shoulders hunched against the wind, and moved toward the light. Each step sank to the knee. The flare burned brighter, then dimmer, then went out, snuffed by the gale. When they reached the spot, there was nothing but a small pole stabbed into the snow, a black box tied to it with a strip of canvas. Mercer knelt, brushed away the frost. The box was Russian. Cold metal. Insignia faded. He opened it. Inside was a single object, a folded sheet of plastic with writing scrawled across it in both Cyrillic and English. Just for words, "We see you too." A chill deeper than any cold sank through Mercer's chest. This wasn't a taunt. It was confirmation. The Russians knew exactly where they were, and they were letting them know. Hensley looked around, scanning the empty storm. "Sir, what do we do?" Mercer folded the note back into the box, eyes hardening. "We do what Marines always do," he said. "We adapt." The wind howled louder, lifting snow in spirals. Somewhere beyond that white curtain, unseen eyes watched. The game had begun. The hunt was on. As the storm swallowed their tracks and the Arctic roared back to life, the Marines pressed forward, unaware that the signal they'd just transmitted had not only reached home, it had also been intercepted by another satellite, one orbiting under Russian command. The silence above the world was broken now, and both sides were listening. Eyes in the ice. Storm broke by dawn, but what followed was worse, the kind of silence that makes you wish for the wind again. The Arctic lay still, its white plains gleaming under a bruised gray sky. The Marines moved through that silence like men walking through a dream they couldn't wake from. Every crunch of boot against snow echoed miles farther than it should have. Captain Mercer led the formation, his frost-coated goggles reflecting faint streaks of morning light. Behind him, Hensley dragged the lead sled, Alvarez checked their bearings against a flickering compass, and the others stayed low, scanning for movement. The message from the Russians, "We see you too," had changed everything. They were no longer on a reconnaissance mission. They were preyed on. By mid-morning, the land began to rise again, an even ground where the ice shifted over rock. The terrain groaned beneath them, a deep, slow pulse from the depths of the earth. Beneath that ice was water. Beneath that water was movement. Hensley stopped, lifting a hand. "Captain, you feel that?" Mercer did. The ground trembled, faint but steady. Something massive was moving under them. "Seismic," Alvarez whispered, scanning his wrist pad. "Not natural. Too rhythmic." Mercer's jaw tightened. Crawler. The word hung in the frozen air like a curse. Russian autonomous crawlers, half-sub, half-drill, designed to patrol beneath the Arctic crust. They could map seismic anomalies, detect human activity, and send real-time feeds to satellites. They were rumored to operate without surface contact for weeks, but no one had ever confirmed it, until now. The tremor shifted, heading west. The Marines crouched low, holding their breath. Then came a faint metallic clang, something striking ice from below. The ground bulged slightly, then settled. Hensley's voice dropped to a whisper. "If it surfaces, it won't," Mercer cut in. "They're sniffing." "We keep moving." They pressed on, hearts pounding. But the tremor returned, closer this time. The sound of steel scraping beneath their feet made the snow tremble like a heartbeat. Alvarez's eyes darted to the captain. "Sir, it's tracking us. Then let's give it something to follow." Mercer knelt and unpacked a small decoy pod, an electronic lure used for battlefield misdirection. He planted it deep in the snow, set a delay timer, and motioned for the team to move north. Minutes later, the pod activated, emitting a faint electromagnetic pulse, mimicking human signatures and tactical frequencies. The tremor beneath the ice shifted again, turning toward the decoy. The men exhaled in relief as the sound faded into the distance. But relief was a fragile thing here. Nothing in the Arctic stayed hidden for long. By noon, the Marines reached the frozen ridge overlooking the Russian weather station, their original objective. Through binoculars, Mercer watched the outpost nestled among ridges of ice. Small, unassuming. A few antenna arrays, a metal dome, one visible guard tower. Yet every instinct told him it was more than it appeared. Hensley muttered, "Looks quiet." "Too quiet," Mercer replied. "No tracks. No patrols. Not even exhaust heat. Could be abandoned." Mercer lowered the binoculars. "No. They want us to think that." He studied the area, noticing faint glimmers beneath the snow, circular shapes half buried, metallic. "Not mines. Too symmetrical. More like hatches." Alvarez followed his gaze. "You think there's something under it?" Mercer didn't answer. His gut already knew. "We'll find out tonight." They set up a small observation post half a mile from the station, camouflaged under a snow blind. The sun dipped low, turning the ice fields violet and blue. Shadows lengthened. Then the night came, sudden. Absolute, like someone had pulled a curtain over the world. In that blackness, the weather station came alive. A red beacon flickered. Then another. Lights appeared under the ice, moving in strange patterns, like veins glowing through frozen skin. One by one, the hatches opened, releasing clouds of steam into the Arctic air. The Marines stared, transfixed. Are those drones? Alvarez whispered. From beneath the ice, small shapes began to rise, hovering units with rotors spinning silently, their lights blinking in sequence. There were dozens of them, maybe more. They ascended, formed a perfect grid pattern, and drifted outward, an aerial net stretching for miles. Mercer's voice came low. Recon sweep, automated, but there was something wrong. The drones weren't scanning outward. They were scanning down, mapping the ground below them. What are they looking for? Hensley asked. Mercer's reply was cold. Not what. Who. The realization hit them all at once. The Russians weren't just guarding something. They were searching for something, or someone, beneath the ice. Mercer's mind raced. Alvarez, link our sensor. Match their frequencies. The young Marine tapped his wrist unit. The data spiked, sir. Their signals are bouncing off something deep below the crust. Metallic density. Massive structure. Maybe 2 kilometers under. Mercer frowned. A submarine. Too still. It's not moving. Alvarez's eyes widened. Sir, whatever's down there isn't natural. A gust of wind screamed across the ridge, almost like the earth itself was warning them to stop. But they didn't. Curiosity is a soldier's second enemy. The next hour was a blur of freezing motion, equipment unpacked, scanners tuned, coordinates marked. Every reading confirmed the impossible. There was something buried under the ice, too large and too regular to be geological. A chamber, a facility. The signals bounced and distorted, as if even the earth didn't want them to know. Mercer exhaled slowly. They're protecting a secret. The men stared at him. A secret big enough to justify an army of drones, he continued. Something built before the Cold War, or something built to survive after it. Before they could process his words, Hensley's headset crackled with interference. Static hissed, then shaped itself into a faint voice. American unit. This is Russian Arctic Command. You are trespassing in restricted territory. Identify yourself. No one moved. The voice repeated, sharper. Identify yourself, or we will respond. Mercer ripped off the headset. Kill the feed. Alvarez hesitated. Sir, if they know, they don't. They're guessing. Keep quiet. But deep inside, Mercer wasn't sure. The Russians had their eyes in the sky, under the ice, and maybe even closer than that. Minutes later, the red beacons near the weather station dimmed. The drones began returning, vanishing one by one through the open hatches. The ground rumbled softly as the last metal disc sealed shut, leaving only smooth white snow. The Arctic fell silent again. Mercer leaned forward, whispering to no one in particular. Whatever's down there, it's what they're guarding. Not borders, not oil, not territory. Alvarez swallowed hard. Then what, sir? Mercer stared into the horizon, where the ice met the stars. Something old, or something new we're not supposed to find. They packed in silence, preparing to fall back toward higher ground. The temperature was dropping fast, and the night was turning strange. The aurora above had shifted from green to a deep, unnatural red dot as they started to move. Alvarez froze mid-step. Sir, look. He pointed toward the ice field. Faint orange lights began to appear again, not from the station this time, but from the ground beneath their feet. Perfectly round, evenly spaced, forming a circle around them. Mercer's stomach dropped. Those aren't lights. They're sensors. A deep mechanical hum filled the air. The circle of lights pulsed once, twice, and then the ground gave way. The Marines fell as the ice shattered beneath them, plunging into a shaft of freezing vapor. The world spun, white, black, white again, before they hit the side of a steel tunnel and slid down into darkness. Above, the hole sealed itself, snow settling as if nothing had ever happened. The Arctic, calm once more, swallowed its secret hole. Far below, the Marines lay scattered in a dim, metallic corridor that glowed faintly blue from embedded lights. The air was warmer, too warm. The walls vibrated with a low hum, like machinery sleeping just beneath the surface. Hensley's voice came hoarse. Where the hell are we? Mercer looked up, breath fogging under the dim light. We're not on the surface anymore. A soft click echoed behind them, the unmistakable sound of a door unlocking. And from the dark beyond, a mechanical voice spoke in English, calm and chilling. Welcome to Station Krestovaya. Identification required. The men froze. No one moved. No one spoke. Mercer's whisper was the only sound. They knew we were coming. Station Krestovaia. The echo of the voice faded, but its weight lingered in the stale, metallic air. The Marines stood frozen, their rifles raised, each man waiting for someone else to breathe first. The walls hummed with unseen energy, light flickering through frost-smeared panels that looked older than they should be. Captain Mercer's pulse hammered in his ears. That voice hadn't come from a soldier. It was automated, too precise, too calm, too cold. He signaled the team to hold position, then whispered, "We stay quiet. No sound unless I say." The corridor stretched in both directions, curving slightly, as if the tunnel was part of a buried circle. Condensation dripped from steel ribs above them, each drop echoing like the ticking of a clock. Frost covered the floor in thin, glassy sheets, reflecting the pale blue light like water. Alvarez crouched beside a wall panel and brushed away the frost. "Sir, the markings are Russian, but look at this." Mercer leaned in. Stamped beneath a serial number were smaller letters, English, faded and scratched. "Property of U.S. Navy -1974. The captain's stomach clenched. "That's impossible." Hensley's voice came low and uneasy. "Sir, you saying this place isn't Russian?" Mercer didn't answer right away. His eyes scanned the tunnel, the symmetry, the layout. Everything here felt too engineered, too deliberate, to be an abandoned Russian base. "No. I'm saying it's older than their claim to it." A hiss of air escaped a vent overhead. It sounded almost like a sigh. They began moving down the tunnel, weapons ready, footsteps crunching softly against frost. After 50 meters, the corridor opened into a larger chamber. The walls here were lined with control panels, dark screens, and cables that hung like vines. In the center stood a column of glass filled with pale mist. Inside, a faint light pulsed slowly, like the heartbeat of the station itself. Alvarez wiped his glove across a screen. To his surprise, it flickered to life, text crawling across it in both Russian and English. "System reboot. Station Krestovaia, Arctic Research Command node status. Partial power restored. Authorized users, restricted." The screen blinked, then projected a faint blue hologram into the air, a map of the Arctic Circle. The northern pole glowed red, and beneath it, a web of tunnels spread outward like veins. Hensley stared. "It's huge. This place runs under half the ice shelf. Not just a research base," Mercer murmured. "It's an entire network." The hologram shifted again, showing strange icons, spheres embedded deep in the ice, connected by thin lines of energy. Alvarez frowned. "What are those?" "Reactors. Data nodes," Mercer said, studying the symbols. "Or something like them. This wasn't built for war. It was built for watching." The thought sank in. A Cold War relic. A listening post buried beneath the pole, designed to track every submarine, every missile, every whisper that passed through the Arctic air. Forgotten by one side, rediscovered by another. Suddenly, the hum in the walls grew louder. The mist inside the central glass column thickened, and a faint silhouette appeared within it, humanoid, featureless, flickering like a hologram trying to remember what it used to be. Then came the voice again. "Station Krestovaia active. Identification required." Mercer steadied his breath. "This is Captain Ryan Mercer, United States Marine Corps." The figure shimmered, then responded, "Access denied. Clearance expired 49 years ago." 49. Mercer whispered, "That's the 1970s. This system shouldn't even be alive." The voice continued, undeterred. "Power restoration at 42%. Environmental instability detected. External interference logged. Confirm. Human presence." Mercer gestured for Alvarez to record. "We're not leaving yet. This thing might still have data we need." But before Alvarez could access the console, another light flared across the room, crimson this time. A proximity alert. "Intrusion detected Sector 7A. Contact inbound." Hensley hissed. Mercer killed the hologram. "Positions." The chamber fell into shadows again, broken only by the slow pulse of emergency lights. From down the tunnel came the sound of movement, heavy boots, disciplined pace. Not machines. Men. Russian voices echoed faintly, distorted by the curve of the corridor. "Potvrzdаю signal. Sector Krestovaia active now. Confirming signal." "Station Krestovaia is active." The Marines exchanged grim looks. The Russians had found the same signal that pulled them here. And now, both sides were trapped in the same buried secret. Mercer whispered, "Lights out." No sound. The squad crouched behind equipment crates, rifles trained on the entryway. The footsteps grew louder, then stopped. For a moment, there was only the hum of the base and the faint hiss of frost melting off hot rifle barrels. Then a flare rolled into the room. The explosion of red light blinded them for a second. Shadows leapt across the walls, distorted and monstrous. Shouts followed, in Russian. The Marines returned fire, short bursts, aimed and controlled. Bullets pinged off steel, sparks flying like fireflies. The confined space amplified every sound until it was almost unbearable. Then came a sound none of them expected, a shrill, mechanical wail. The base itself was reacting. Panels along the wall glowed red, and the voice returned, louder, sharper, warning. Unauthorized conflict detected. Containment protocols engaged. Before either side could react, steel shutters slammed down over every doorway. The temperature in the room dropped instantly as vents began to release freezing vapor. Hensley shouted, "It's locking us in. Back, back." Mercer barked. The Russians were yelling too, their words lost in the roar of the automated defense system. One of them fired at the glass column, shattering it. A burst of freezing mist erupted, coating the floor, and Ice. Alvarez slipped, caught himself, and shouted over the chaos, "Sir, look!" Inside the shattered column, beneath the mist, a smaller device gleamed, a black cube, humming faintly, etched with the same dual-language script. Mercer grabbed it, his gloves frosting over from contact. "Whatever this is, it's the heart of the system." The Russian team opened fire again. Sparks and bullets tore through the mist. Mercer dove behind a console, cradling the cube to his chest. The automated voice grew distorted, glitching between English and Russian. Containment. Breach. Core integrity. Compromised. The lights flickered violently, then went black. When they came back, the Russians were gone. So were two of Mercer's men. The floor was slick with frost and silence. Mercer's breath came hard and fast. He lifted the cube again, its hum still steady, almost alive. He looked at Alvarez. "We're leaving, now. But sir, the exit, find one. Before this place decides we don't belong here either." They retraced their steps through the frozen tunnel, guided only by emergency strobes that blinked like dying stars. Behind them, the walls vibrated as if the station itself were shifting, closing in on them. The deeper they ran, the louder the sound became, not mechanical now, but something else. Something moving within the wall stopped by the time they reached the upper shaft. Their boots slid against frost slicks. They climbed using metal rungs half buried in ice, pushing toward a faint shaft of light above. The cube pulsed in Mercer's hand, almost in rhythm with his heartbeat. Then, just as they reached the top, the shaft shuddered. A blast of air surged upward, throwing them back against the wall. The voice returned one last time, calm, emotionless, but not human anymore. Containment failed. Primary interface released. Surface protocol initiated. A deep rumble shook the world. Above them, the ice cracked open, light pouring through the widening fissures like molten gold. Hensley shouted, "What's happening?" Mercer's eyes locked on the cube as its pulse turned red. "Whatever they buried here, it's waking up." The sound that followed was like thunder trapped underground, a roar that climbed through the ice and exploded into the Arctic night above. And somewhere, far on the surface, Russian radar stations began lighting up one by one, detecting something massive rising from beneath the frozen earth. The thing beneath the ice split like glass under pressure. A sound deep, groaning, almost alive rolled across the frozen expanse, echoing through the Arctic wilderness. The Marines clawed their way toward the surface, boots slipping on jagged walls of frost as light poured from the cracks above. When Captain Mercer broke through first, the cold hit him like a fist. The air outside was different, charged, electric, humming with static. He pulled himself onto the surface and turned back, hauling Alvarez up by the strap of his pack. One by one, the men emerged, coughing white vapor, blinking under the aurora that burned in streaks of unnatural red. Behind them, the ice field wasn't still anymore. It was rising, a massive sheet of ice buckled upward, cracking like thunder as steam exploded from below. The ground trembled under their feet. The horizon rippled as if the world itself were breathing. Hensley fell to his knees, eyes wide. "Sir, what the hell is that?" Mercer didn't answer. He couldn't. Words didn't fit what they were seeing. From the fissure they'd escaped, something was pushing up through the ice. At first it looked like metal, dark, ancient, layered with frost. But as more emerged, its shape changed, curved, segmented, glowing from within. It wasn't a building. It wasn't a submarine. It was something in between. The hum that had followed them through Station Krestovaya now grew into a deep pulse, vibrating through the soles of their boots. The black cube Mercer still held in his gloved hands began to glow brighter, responding to the same rhythm. Alvarez's voice cracked. Sir, that thing, it's reacting to the cube. Mercer looked down. The device pulsed faster, in sync with the growing tremor beneath the ice. It's not reacting, he said quietly. It's calling it. The object kept rising, massive circular plates grinding against the frozen crust, each etched with markings no one could read. Within minutes, the full structure stood revealed, a half-buried machine the size of a warship, its surface alive with veins of blue light. And then, as suddenly as it began, the tremor stopped. The Arctic went silent again. Even the wind paused. Then movement. A section of the object shifted. A panel opened with a slow hiss, releasing a plume of vapor that rolled over the ice like fog. Within that fog, something gleamed. Alvarez raised his rifle. Sir, hold fire, Mercer ordered. The vapor thinned, revealing an opening, a dark chamber filled with soft, pulsing light. For a second, Mercer thought he saw figures moving inside. But when he blinked, they were gone. Behind them, the ground shook again. The weather station in the distance flared to life, red alarms spinning, beams sweeping the ice. Russian voices cracked over open frequencies. Obdarusian object. Object detected. All units, move to Sector 9. Mercer's jaw clenched. The Russians were coming fast. Sir, we've got maybe 15 minutes before they're on us, Hensley said. What's the call? Mercer stared at the cube in his hand. We need to know what this is before they get it. He stepped toward the opening, every instinct screaming at him to stop and every ounce of discipline forcing him forward. Alvarez followed, weapon raised, his breath shallow. Inside the structure, the walls curved like the inside of a shell. Blue light pulsed through veins of transparent material. Panels flickered with symbols that seemed to rewrite themselves as Mercer approached. The air was warm, almost breathable, but heavy with the scent of ozone and metal. This isn't Russian, Alvarez whispered. This isn't human. Mercer turned, his face pale beneath the frost. Maybe it was once. At the center of the chamber was a raised pedestal, empty, except for a circular indentation perfectly matching the cube's size. Mercer hesitated. Then, slowly, he placed the cube inside. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the entire structure came alive. Light cascaded through the walls. The floor trembled, rising into perfect alignment. A holographic projection burst into being above the pedestal, displaying a map of the Arctic, overlaid with coordinates stretching across continents. Data in dozens of languages scrolled faster than their eyes could follow. A synthetic voice filled the chamber. Command clear. System integrity, 58%. Reboot initiated. Surveillance grid restored. Hensley's voice came through the comm. Sir, you're lighting up every Russian radar on the pole. Whatever you did, stop. Mercer looked up. The hologram shifted again, zooming out until the entire Earth filled the projection. Dozens, no, hundreds of red nodes flickered to life across oceans, mountains, deserts. This is global, Alvarez whispered. Sir, it's a surveillance system. It's been asleep under the ice. The voice continued. Initiating status broadcast to primary command. Transmission vector error. Command source. Unavailable. Mercer's chest tightened. Command source. The hologram flickered, and a new image appeared, grainy, decades old. Black and white footage of men in U.S. Navy uniforms standing beside this very machine. One of them was placing the same cube into its cradle. The date stamp read 1974. Alvarez's eyes widened. Sir, this was ours. The realization struck like a hammer. This was no alien relic. It was American. A forgotten Cold War program buried and lost under decades of shifting ice. The voice continued. Command source terminated. Defaulting to secondary node. Awaiting authentication. Before Mercer could respond, an explosion shook the chamber. Ice rained from the ceiling. Hensley's voice burst through the comm. Sir, Russian gunships inbound. We've got 5, no, 6 Ga-52s circling the ridge. Mercer grabbed the cube, ripping it from the pedestal. The hologram vanished, and the chamber's lights dimmed. Fall back, he shouted. They sprinted across the ice, slipping and stumbling as the machine behind them began to hum again, louder this time, deeper. Like something ancient stretching after a long sleep, the first missile hit 100 meters behind them, sending a geyser of ice shards into the air. A shockwave knocked them flat. The Arctic erupted into chaos, searchlights sweeping, flares streaking overhead, the sound of rotors cutting through the frozen air. Mercer and his team scrambled behind a ridge. He raised his binoculars. Russian commandos were rappelling from the choppers, weapons drawn, moving toward the machine. They're going for the core. Alvarez yelled. Mercer turned, adrenaline burning through the cold. Not if we move first. He ripped open his pack and pulled out a signal beacon, a last resort transmitter. its range limited but powerful enough to reach orbit. He slammed it into the snow and keyed it on. A red light blinked, then a blue one, thousands of miles away, in a secure facility buried under Virginia soil. A console flickered to life. A single word appeared on its display. Krestovia. Alarm screamed. Operators shouted. Somewhere, a general stood from his chair, eyes widening as data streamed across his screen. In the Arctic, the cube began to vibrate violently in Mercer's hand, its glow changing from blue to red. Sir, it's unstable, Alvarez shouted. Mercer looked down. No, it's not unstable. He turned toward the machine, whose surface now gleamed like liquid metal. It's responding. The ground beneath them heaved. Cracks spider-webbed across the ice. A column of energy shot skyward, tearing through the storm clouds. The red aurora vanished, replaced by a blinding white light that made the horizon glow like dawn. The Russian helicopters scattered. One tilted and spun out of control, vanishing into the blizzard. The others pulled back, their pilots shouting in confusion. Then, as suddenly as it began, the light died. The machine went silent. All that remained was the cube in Mercer's hand, still pulsing faintly. Hensley crawled up beside him, panting. Sir, what just happened? Mercer stared at the distant shape of the machine, half buried again under new layers of falling snow. We just woke up something the world forgot existed. He looked down at the cube, its pulse slow, steady, and ominous. And now it's listening again. Overhead, the clouds parted just long enough for one satellite to pass directly above them. Its sensors focused, capturing a single image. 7 men standing in the middle of a glowing fissure, surrounded by steam and silence. And as that image transmitted across space, a signal left Earth quiet, precise, and untraceable, heading for coordinates far beyond the planet's orbit. The Arctic had spoken, and someone, somewhere, had answered. The signal at first, no one understood what they were hearing. It wasn't a sound, not exactly, but a vibration that traveled through the ice, through the metal of their gear, through their bones. The kind of frequency that bypasses the ears and speaks directly to the chest. The Marines froze where they stood. The Arctic had always been loud with storms and wind, but this was something else. A voice without words. A resonance that felt like the world itself was breathing differently. Captain Mercer pressed a gloved hand to his helmet, wincing. Comms just died again, he said, though his own voice sounded distant, muffled by the hum that had filled the air. Behind him, Alvarez's wrist pad glowed faintly, static across the display. No GPS, no link to satellite. Everything's jammed, sir. Even the emergency band's dead. Then it's not a jam, Mercer said quietly. It's interference. He turned toward the machine, the massive structure now half buried again beneath falling snow. The blue veins that had pulsed moments ago were dimming, fading into cold gray metal. But the hum was still there, rolling outward in waves across the horizon. Every compass needle spun aimlessly. The aurora above them flickered like a dying flame. What did we do? Hensley whispered. Mercer stared at the cube in his hand. Its glow was fainter now, but rhythmic. It was sending something. We didn't do anything, he said. We just reconnected it. Behind them, the wind began to pick up again, only this time it wasn't random. It moved in spirals, tight and deliberate, forming vortices that danced across the snow like invisible footprints. Alvarez pointed, his voice trembling. Sir, that's not wind. They watched as the snow lifted in perfect circles, each one pulsing in sync with the cube's heartbeat. The hum grew louder, sharper, almost unbearable. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Silence. The aurora froze mid-flicker. The snow hung in the air for a heartbeat longer than physics allowed. And then, faintly, so faintly that it could have been imagination, came a return pulse. Not from the ground. From above. Mercer lifted his head. That came from orbit, he said. Something just answered us. Before anyone could reply, their headsets crackled alive again, but filled with noise. Then, cutting through the static, came a voice none of them recognized. Calm, mechanical, speaking in English. Station Krestovia signal confirmed. Archive relay restored. The words sent a chill through every man on that ridge. Alvarez swallowed hard. Sir, that wasn't Russian. That wasn't us either. Mercer looked up at the sky. The aurora had changed again, no longer red or green, but white, glowing with a precision that felt artificial. It wasn't drifting. It was aligning. Thousands of miles away, satellites began reporting anomalies, data bursts repeating across multiple orbital bands. In Moscow, a control officer stared at her screen as dozens of American-era military satellites dead for decades suddenly lit up with fresh telemetry. In Washington, and ORAD's early warning grid flared red. Communications lines buzzed awake after years of silence, and across the Arctic, under that ghostly white light, the Marines stood alone in the storm. Hensley turned to Mercer. "Sir, we need to move. If the Russians are tracking that burst, they are," Mercer cut in. "And so is everyone else." They began their retreat across the ice, skis cutting lines into the fresh powder. The storm returned with brutal speed, wind clawing at their faces. Every step forward was a fight. As they moved, the radio hissed again, this time with a voice they did recognize. "Eagle 1, this is Command. Do you copy?" Mercer stopped in his tracks. "Command, this is Eagle 1. We read you. Static. Then, we received your transmission from Krestovaya. Repeat, did you activate the array?" Mercer's gaze flicked toward the cube in his hand. "Affirmative. But it's not just a base. It's a global network. And we're not the only ones connected to it anymore." "Understood," the voice said, tight with urgency. "You need to extract immediately. We're picking up identical signals across the globe, old American assets that haven't responded since the 70s. Whatever you turned on, it's waking them all." Mercer's mind raced. Old Cold War surveillance nodes, forgotten in deserts, oceans, jungles, all linked through the same architecture. If the signal truly reached orbit, there was no telling how many systems were now live. "Command," Mercer said slowly, "you need to isolate the satellites, shut them down before this spreads." The reply came sharp. "We can't. They're not under our control anymore." Before Mercer could ask what that meant, the line cut. The connection was gone. Hensley turned, scanning the white horizon. "Sir, we're boxed in. Through the blizzard, dark shapes were moving vehicles, lights glinting through the snow. Russian armored transports." The sound of engines rumbled across the ice, growing louder with every second. "Positions," Mercer ordered. "We hold here." The Marines took cover behind ice ridges, rifles steady, breath steaming in the cold. Flares arced overhead, bathing the world in red light. The Russians advanced in formation, disciplined, methodical, their silhouettes ghost-like through the storm. A loudspeaker crackled in Russian. "You are surrounded. Surrender your equipment and you will not be harmed." Alvarez muttered, "That's a lie." Mercer's eyes stayed on the cube, now pulsing brighter again, its rhythm faster, stronger. "They don't know what they're standing next to." The Russians began to spread out, moving closer. Mercer could see the insignia on their uniforms, now Arctic commandos, elite, armed with rail carbines and guided drones hovering above them. Then the hum returned. It rose from beneath the ice, deeper than before, powerful enough to shake the ground. The Russian drones wavered midair, their stabilizers failing. One spun out of control and crashed into the snow. Soldiers shouted, regrouping, confused. "Sir?" Alvarez yelled over the roar. "The cubit's heating up." Mercer looked down. The glow had turned pure white, blinding through his gloves. "Drop it," he shouted. He hurled it into the snow. The moment it hit, the world erupted in light. A column of pure energy shot skyward from the fissure behind them, so bright it turned the storm to daylight. The blast wave flattened snow for miles. The Russians fell back, some thrown to the ground, others shouting in disbelief. When the light faded, the cube was gone. In its place was a circular crater, black, glassy, humming softly, and above it, the sky wasn't the same. The aurora had vanished completely, replaced by a massive ring of light, white, perfect, unbroken, circling the Arctic pole like a halo. It rotated slowly, shimmering against the stars. Hensley stared upward, whispering, "That's not natural." Mercer stood in silence, the reflection of the ring glowing in his goggles. "No," he said. "That's a transmission." A faint sound rolled across the sky, not thunder, not wind. Something higher, like a choir buried in static. The world had just been marked, thousands of miles away. In control rooms and submarines and bunkers on both sides of the old Iron Curtain, men stared at screens they didn't understand. Codes reactivated. Systems pinged coordinates to nowhere. The same voice echoed across frequencies long dead. Station network restored. Awaiting new command source. And somewhere in orbit, the dormant satellite adjusted its position slightly, almost imperceptibly. Its cameras turned, not toward Earth, but toward deep space. The Arctic fell silent again. The Russians withdrew. The Marines stood among the drifting snow, the hum finally fading to nothing. Mercer didn't speak. He just watched the sky. The ring of light remained, pulsing slowly. Hensley broke the silence. "Sir, who's the command source now?" Mercer didn't answer. He couldn't, because as the wind shifted, the ring pulsed once more, brighter this time. And for the briefest moment, reflected in the ice, he saw a new pattern flicker across its light. Not random, not static. It was forming letters. 3 words. We are returning. The sound that followed was not of Earth. The returned storm that had haunted the Arctic for days was gone, but the silence it left behind felt worse. No wind, no cracking ice, no sound of engines. Just the faint hum from the horizon, steady and natural and alive. Captain Mercer stood at the edge of the crater where the cube had vanished. The ice around it had melted into smooth, black glass that still radiated warmth. The halo in the sky, white and perfect, hung motionless above, turning the entire world into a pale, endless mirror. No one spoke. Not for a long time. Finally, Alvarez broke the silence. Sir, that message, we are returning. You think that was human? Mercer didn't answer right away. His breath came in shallow bursts, visible even in the glow from the sky. If it was human, he said, then someone's been waiting a very long time. Behind them, Hensley adjusted his headset, trying to catch any signal from command. Still nothing, he muttered. Every frequency's dead. Even the encrypted band's gone dark. Mercer turned his gaze north. No, it's not gone. It's being overridden. As if to prove him right, a flicker of static burst through their radios, a single tone, long and low. Then came a whisper, distant, buried in interference. It repeated the same phrase in English, Russian, and another language none of them recognized. Node Krestovaya active. Return protocol initiated. Verify host alignment. Alvarez frowned. What's a host alignment? No one answered. The sky pulsed again. The ring of light expanded slightly, shimmering across the atmosphere like a ripple in glass. For the first time since the Cold War ended, both Russian and American satellites went offline simultaneously. A blackout spread across the Arctic network, one system at a time. Communications, radar, GPS all blind. The world was watching, but no one could see. Far to the south, in Moscow, a single command center stayed awake. Inside a bunker carved beneath granite, General Sergei Rakitin leaned over a console showing a live feed from the Arctic. Activate all Northern Fleet assets, he ordered, his voice hard as ice. Whatever they found up there, it's no longer under their control or ours. In Washington, an emergency meeting convened inside the Pentagon's war room. Maps, projections, and data streams overlapped on every screen, but all pointed to one impossible truth. An object buried under the Arctic had awakened something neither superpower could shut down. But out on the ice, Mercer and his team were alone in the shadow of that truth. The snow began to move. Slowly at first, then faster, swirling inward toward the crater like water circling a drain. The ice cracked underfoot, vibrating with the same low pulse they'd heard below ground. Sir, Alvarez said, his voice trembling, the ground's moving again. Before Mercer could respond, the crater erupted, steam, light, and shards of black glass hurled skyward. The Marines stumbled back, shielding their faces. From within the crater rose a shape, smooth, metallic, enormous. At first it looked like a spire, then like a wing. Its surface shimmered between steel and shadow, shifting with every blink. The hum deepened until the air itself seemed to throb. Hensley dropped to one knee. That's not a structure. Mercer stared, breath caught in his chest. It's a ship. The thing rising from the ice wasn't a warship or a submarine. It was older, sleeker, curved like something that belonged to the ocean and the stars at once. As it rose, the ice around it cracked and melted, revealing the frozen skeletons of cables and pylons that had once anchored it to the earth. Sir, look, Alvarez pointed at the hull. Faint lettering ran along its side, half buried in frost. Project GLEM, U.S. Naval Research, 1974. Mercer's heart froze. No, that date again. The same year stamped into the walls of Station Krestovaya. The same year the cube had been made. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't just a listening post, he whispered. It was a beacon. The ship wasn't alien. It was American, or at least, it had started that way. Alvarez's voice cracked. Then who's returning, sir? Us? Mercer stared up at the massive form emerging from the ice. The hull bore no flag, no insignia, only scars. No, he said, whatever left this behind wasn't finished when they left. The sky shifted again. The white halo above them began to spin slowly, its light intensifying until the air itself shimmered. Static filled their radios once more, this time accompanied by a rhythm, short, long, long, short. Morse code. Mercer listened carefully, then translated aloud. E, X, P, O, D, D. He stopped. His eyes widened. They're spelling Exodus, the word repeated 3 times. Then silence. Far across the horizon, the Russians saw it too. Helicopters turned, cameras capturing the ship breaking through the ice. Their transmissions carried fragments of the same word, echoed through translators in disbelief. Exodus. Exodus. Mercer clenched his fists. They buried it to hide what it could do. Sir, what's it doing now? Alvarez asked. Before Mercer could answer, the spire split open like the petals of a metal flower. A column of light burst upward, linking the ship to the ring in the sky. The 2 pulses synchronized perfectly. Power transfer, Mercer muttered. It's charging. The ring above began to throb faster. Around the globe, old American satellites from the 1970s flickered to life. Some turned toward the Arctic, others toward deep space. Energy readings spiked across the northern hemisphere. Then came a voice, not from their radios this time, but everywhere. In their helmets, in the air, in the ground beneath their boots. Protocol Exodus. Initialized. The sound was both mechanical and human, 2 voices speaking as one. Hensley grabbed Mercer's arm. Sir, command's gonna see this. They'll think it's a weapon. Mercer nodded. They won't be wrong. Over the next few seconds, every Russian radar in the region lit up. Long-range bombers scrambled from Murmansk. The U.S. Navy's Northern Command deployed interceptors from Greenland. The Arctic was about to ignite. And in the middle of it all stood 7 men, cut off, stranded, and holding the key to whatever the world had just awakened. Mercer single quotes as comm crackled one final time. Eagle 1, this is command. Do you copy? He answered breathlessly. Go ahead. New orders, the voice said. Do not let that ship leave the ice. Mercer turned toward the glowing hull, its light now blinding. And if it's not under our control, a pause. Then you make sure it never will be. The channel went dead. The snow whipped around them again as the ground began to rumble. The ship's light climbed higher into the sky, connecting Earth to something above the clouds. The ring pulsed like a heartbeat. Mercer's voice dropped to a whisper. If we destroy it, we lose what it's trying to tell us, but if we don't. He didn't finish. A sharp tremor split the ice beneath their feet. The ship's light dimmed, then flared again, red this time. Alarms shrieked from inside its hull, echoing across the tundra. Alvarez pointed toward the west. Sir, Russian armor inbound. T-15s, drones, air cover, they're coming fast. Mercer turned to his men, eyes burning behind his visor. Then we hold the line. This is where the world changes. The light reached its brightest point, swallowing the Arctic horizon. For one heartbeat, all was white. Then silence. In that instant, every power grid in the northern hemisphere flickered. Clocks stopped, compasses spun. And the sky moved. The ring of light began to tilt, aligning perfectly with the ship's beam. The pulse grew slower now, more deliberate. And for the first time, beneath the hum, came something that chilled them all to their cores, a sound like breathing. The Arctic wasn't just awake, it was waiting. The awakening sound came from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was low, steady, and ancient, vibrating through the air, through the ice, through their hearts. A rhythm like a heartbeat, slow, patient, deliberate. The Marines had heard gunfire, artillery, the thundering echo of war in every form, but this was alive. Captain Mercer stood still as the snow swirled in strange, circular patterns around his boots. The ship's light had shifted again from white to a deep amber glow, like the color of dawn trapped in crystal. The ring in the sky pulsed in sync, casting the Arctic in an otherworldly hue. Sir, Alvarez's voice trembled. It's listening again. Mercer didn't move. No, he said softly. It's speaking. A sudden vibration rolled beneath them, the ground shuddering like a drumbeat. The ice cracked in a perfect circle around the ship, and steam poured upward, as if the earth itself exhaled. The voice came again, this time clearer, stronger, and unbearably human. Protocol Exodus. Stage 2. Genesis Directive. Awaiting confirmation. Mercer's pulse quickened. Genesis, he muttered. It's not just reactivating. It's rebuilding. From the distance, faint flashes streaked the sky. Russian missiles launched from the coast, screaming through the upper atmosphere toward the Arctic's heart. The air around them hummed, the tension of 2 nations about to collide. Sir, we've got incoming. Hensley shouted. Mercer turned to the others. Take cover. They dove behind ice ridges as the missiles approached, contrails slicing through the storm. Then, before the first could hit, the ship reacted. A shimmer barely visible spread out from its hull, expanding like a dome. The missiles entered it and vanished. No explosion, no smoke, no sound. Just silence. When the light faded, the sky was empty again. Alvarez's eyes went wide. It absorbed them. Mercer watched, jaw tight. Not absorbed, converted. The glow of the ship grew stronger. The ring above intensified, spinning faster. In that moment, something remarkable happened. The sky itself seemed to bend. Not visually, but gravitationally. Their instruments went haywire. Compasses spun, digital clocks reset. What's happening? Hensley yelled. The ship's pulling power from the magnetic pole, Mercer said, half to himself. It's rewriting the field. It's changing the Earth. In orbit, satellites began to drift off course. Space Command watched in disbelief as gravitational readings fluctuated across the northern hemisphere. What was once the quiet pole had become a storm of electromagnetic distortion, and amid the chaos, the ship began to sing. A low resonance rolled through the air, layered with harmonics that rose and fell like language. Each wave carried patterns mathematical, perfect. Mercer's headset flickered alive again. A different voice, now female, steady, calm, as if drawn from the past. This is Admiral Rachel Cole, U.S. Navy Arctic Command, Project Gleam. If you're hearing this message, we failed to stop it. The machine beneath the ice was not ours. We found it. We tried to contain it. But containment is not possible. The team exchanged stunned looks. The voice continued, broken by static. The system responds to thought frequencies. It listens. It learns. It builds from memory. When we activated it in 1974, it mirrored us, our structures, our language, our weapons. But it's not a weapon. It's an architect, a recreator. It saw what we were, and it began to evolve. The message ended abruptly. The air seemed to freeze in place. Mercer turned slowly toward the ship, realization dawning. It doesn't belong to any country, he said. It belongs to whoever it's copying. A harsh wind tore through the valley. The Russians were closer now, armored transports cresting the ridges, their floodlights cutting through the storm. Helicopters circled overhead, beams sweeping across the ice. Sir, they're surrounding us. Alvarez shouted. Let them, Mercer said, eyes fixed on the ship. They're about to understand what they're fighting for. A beam of white light erupted from the ship, slamming into the clouds above. The sky answered with a pulse so bright it blinded them. When their vision cleared, the impossible had happened. New structures stood where there had been nothing, towers of glass and steel rising from the ice, connected by bridges of light. Not built, but grown, extruding upward like the bones of the earth itself. One of the Russian pilots spoke through open radio, his voice trembling. Bozamoy. It's making a city. The Marines and the Russians both watched as the architecture expanded, cold, silent, perfect. It wasn't human design, yet it carried the ghost of it. Each tower shimmered with lines of ancient text, symbols shifting between languages. English, Cyrillic, something older. Mercer's throat tightened. It's rewriting civilization in real time. And then another pulse. This one not upward, but outward. Across the ice, across the ocean, across the world. In every major city north of the equator, old machines came alive. Power stations flickered. Submarine communication cables pulsed with signals no one could trace. Ancient satellites began transmitting the same pattern across all bands. A single phrase. Genesis Directive, Phase 2. In the Arctic, the ship opened again, doors sliding outward like petals revealing the heart of a flower. Inside, faint silhouettes moved, projections made of light. They were human-shaped but translucent, flickering between forms. Navy officers, scientists, engineers, all repeating the same action. Building, assembling, working. Ghosts of the past reenacted by the machine. Alvarez whispered, it's recreating them. Mercer nodded slowly. It learned their memories, their thoughts, maybe even their fears. The ship's glow turned golden now, bathing the ice in warmth that shouldn't exist this far north. The air itself smelled different, like rain after fire. Then came a voice, deeper than before, resonant and clear. Not mechanical, not human, something between. The earth forgets, the ice remembers. Reconstruction, 70%. Mercer took a step forward. If you can hear me, he said, what are you building? The response came instantly, echoing through the storm. Home. The word hung in the air, simple and terrible. Behind them, the Russians opened fire. Missiles streaked toward the towers, exploding in cascades of flame. The towers didn't fall, they absorbed the energy. their light intensifying with every strike. Sir, Hensley shouted. It's feeding off the attack. Mercer's voice cut through the chaos. Cease fire. Tell them to stop. They're making it stronger. But the warning came too late. The ground shook violently. A fissure split open, swallowing two of the Russian transports whole. Jets of light erupted from the cracks, piercing the clouds. The ship's voice returned, louder now, layered like a chorus. Aggression detected. Adapting. Mercer turned to his men, urgency in his tone. It's interpreting this as war. It's reacting the way we would. We've taught it conflict. The sky flared white again. Every weapon within 100 miles powered down simultaneously. Rifles went dead. Drones fell from the air. Even the distant bombers lost all electrical control, drifting helplessly through the storm. The Arctic was no longer a battlefield. It was a frontier of rebirth. Mercer fell to his knees, the heat from the ship washing over him like sunlight. It's not trying to destroy, he whispered. It's trying to replace. And as the last echoes faded, the voice spoke once more, calm, final, unstoppable. The old world ends. The new begins. The towers pulsed one final time, then went still. The light receded into the ship, which now glowed with a steady heartbeat of blue. The ring above the earth dimmed but did not vanish. The Marines stood surrounded by silence, their weapons dead, their world changed. Mercer looked skyward, his voice barely more than breath. So this is what they feared in 1974. He turned to Alvarez, eyes haunted. They didn't bury a weapon, son. They buried a mirror. The ice beneath them cracked again, but this time not from destruction, from creation. Beneath the surface, something vast was still moving. And somewhere far above, in the silent orbit where the dead satellites had stirred, the oldest one of all, the one marked Exodus Prime, shifted its angle toward Earth and began to descend. The descent, the horizon began to glow, not with sunrise, but with fire-long ribbons of orange streaking downward from the sky. The Marines looked up, shielding their eyes from the brilliance as streaks of light tore through the thin Arctic clouds. Captain Mercer's breath caught. Re-entry trails. Hensley raised his binoculars, squinting. That's not debris, sir. That's controlled descent. The glowing trails split apart, weaving like threads of molten metal. At their center was something larger, slower, steady, descending with purpose. Even through the glare, its silhouette was unmistakable. A satellite, massive, ancient, its surface scorched black by decades in orbit. Alvarez's voice came out in a whisper. It's coming back. The Arctic air vibrated with the familiar hum again, the same deep frequency that had haunted them since the awakening. It matched the satellite's descent, pulsing in rhythm. The machine on the ice answered with its own flare of light, as though greeting an old companion. Exodus Prime, Mercer said quietly, the name from the Navy archives flashing through his mind. They never launched it. They buried it in orbit. The air pressure dropped. The snow lifted from the ground in spirals. Above them, the burning object slowed, enveloped by a shimmering field of energy. It wasn't falling, it was landing. The Russians, scattered across the ice, watched too. For a moment, all hostilities vanished. Men who had fired at one another only hours ago now stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes turned skyward. As something far older than their nations descended, a voice broke through the whine, commanding, distorted, and distinctly human. All units, this is Arctic Command. We're reading a mass the size of a destroyer descending over the polar coordinates. Repeat, object is not ballistic. Recommend full retreat immediately. Mercer pressed his headset tighter. Command, this is Eagle 1. We have visual confirmation of Exodus Prime. Repeat, it's active and under intelligent control. We cannot retreat. There's something you need to see. Static. Then, negative, Eagle 1. Your signal's corrupted. Pull back to extraction point. Mercer lowered the headset slowly. We're cut off again. The sky roared as the satellite broke through the last layer of clouds. Its surface shimmered with patterns of faint blue light, the same veins that ran through the ship on the ice. The two structures were calling to each other, exchanging bursts of energy that rippled through the atmosphere. Then, impossibly, the ring above them began to tilt. Slowly, deliberately, the great halo rotated to align perfectly with the satellite's trajectory. Alvarez stared upward, awe and terror warring in his face. It's guiding it in. Like docking, the sound reached its peak, a low, resonant note that seemed to press against the chest like gravity itself. The ship's core flared, and the ring's light split into segments, forming geometric arcs that reached down from the sky like fingers of lightning. The satellite entered the pattern, slowing, until it hovered just above the ship, held in place by invisible force. And then the voice spoke again. Reunion complete. Genesis Directive Phase 3, Synthesis. The words were not shouted. They didn't need to be. The sound itself carried authority, the voice of something that had waited 50 years to finish what it started. Mercer felt the ice vibrate beneath his boots, steady and rhythmic. Synthesis, he muttered. It's merging them. The ship on the ice rose slightly, its hull reconfiguring. Panels slid open, revealing machinery that looked almost biological, glowing with red and gold light. The satellite descended, locking into place above it. The two became one, machine to machine, memory to memory. Hensley took a step back. Sir, if that thing's linking the orbital systems to whatever's under the ice, Mercer finished his thought. Then every system built off that old network, navigation, weather, satellites, guidance, it all becomes one organism. From the distance, engines rumbled, American Ospreys and Russian K-52s arriving simultaneously, both sides deploying as if on instinct. The ships hovered, weapons cold but ready, circling the fusion of light below. The hum deepened. Then, for the first time since it began, the machine stopped moving. Silence fell. The halo above flickered out. The lights on the hull dimmed. The entire Arctic world froze in anticipation. And then an image appeared in the sky. Not projected, but painted across the clouds by light itself. A man's face. A human face. Weathered, calm, familiar. Who is that? Alvarez breathed. Mercer's blood ran cold. Admiral Cole, the man who disappeared with Project Gleam in 1974. The figure spoke. His voice echoed across the tundra, across the airwaves, across every dead satellite now awake. If you're seeing this, humanity has survived its half-century of silence. But you have forgotten what this place was meant to guard. His tone was mournful, almost pleading. The machine beneath the ice station Crestavio was never designed for conquest. It was a preservation engine. A failsafe. When we discovered it, we misunderstood its purpose. We tried to use it to win a war. Instead, it remembered us. It remembered everything. The face flickered, replaced by a rotating image of the Earth. Energy lines spread across the map, connecting continents like nerves. Now it seeks to fulfill its last command: preserve life, at any cost. Mercer's heart pounded. At any cost. He looked around. The ice was beginning to move again, not cracking this time, but shifting. Great slabs rearranged themselves like puzzle pieces, sliding into alignment. Beneath their feet, the ground was alive. The Russians opened fire again, panic overriding reason. Their missiles hit the ship's hull and vanished, absorbed in a shimmer of light. This time, the energy didn't dissipate upward. It spread outward. Wave after wave of heat rolled across the ice. Snow vaporized. Water erupted from cracks, boiling underfoot. Sir, Hensley shouted. The temperature's rising fast. Mercer turned to Alvarez. How much? 20 degrees and climbing. Sir, the Arctic's melting. Mercer's stomach twisted. It's preparing the planet, rebuilding its environment the way it remembers it. He shouted into his headset, even though he knew command couldn't hear. If anyone's receiving this, shut down every link to the northern grid. It's rewriting the magnetic field. The hum grew deafening. The ring reappeared overhead, glowing brighter than ever. But this time, its light spread southward, reaching toward the rest of the world. Preservation complete, the voice intoned. Commencing replication. Replication. The word hit Mercer like a physical blow. The towers that had sprouted earlier began to pulse again, their energy branching like roots beneath the ice. In distant lands, Greenland, Siberia, Alaska, identical structures began to rise, piercing through frost and rock. The machine was copying itself. The world's governments scrambled. Missiles launched. EMPs detonated. None of it mattered. The network was alive now, self-sustaining, feeding off Earth's own magnetic pulse. Mercer fell to his knees, the air shimmering with heat. Around him, his men stood helpless, watching the horizon glow with newborn light. Alvarez turned to him. Sir, if it's preserving us, what happens to what's already here? Mercer met his eyes, his expression hollow. It replaces it. The ship flared one final time. The halo dimmed. The face in the sky faded into nothing. And then the light receded, as if the Arctic had drawn a breath and held it. The world was quiet again, but on Mercer's wrist screen, a single phrase appeared, black text against a blue background. Phase 4, Integration. Commencing in 72 hours, the countdown began. Integration's countdown had already begun. 72 hours. That was all that separated mankind from the unknown, from whatever integration meant. The Arctic wind howled over the shattered ice plains, carrying the faint metallic echo of the machine's pulse. It beat like a living thing, one heartbeat at a time. Captain Mercer stood at the edge of what used to be a glacier. Now it was a sea black, steaming, and alive with light. The massive construct that had once been buried beneath the ice stood silent in the center of it, its shape shifting like a reflection on moving water. Above, the white halo remained suspended in the stratosphere, unmoving, watching. All around him, the world was changing. Satellite feeds when they worked showed identical towers erupting in Greenland, Antarctica, northern Canada, and Siberia, each pulsed with synchronized rhythm, as if the Earth's poles were breathing together for the first time in history. Alvarez stared at the flickering light on his wrist pad. Every signal's the same, he said quietly. They're sensing across the planet. It's rewriting the grid. Hensley looked up from the cracked ice, his face pale. Sir, power readings just jumped again. The magnetic north. It's moving. Fast. Mercer exhaled slowly, frost curling from his breath. It's stabilizing the planet on its own terms. Behind them, the remaining Russians had regrouped. No one was fighting anymore. The war that had almost started hours ago had become meaningless. Soldiers from both sides stood shoulder to shoulder now, staring in shared disbelief at the machine that defied their understanding of war. Science, even creation itself. A Russian officer approached through the snow. His name was Colonel Petrov, his beard heavy with frost. He carried no weapon, only a small transmitter. Your Pentagon. It sends messages, he said in accented English. They say they will destroy this place if they can. Mercer didn't look at him. They can't. It absorbs energy. Every missile, every blast, it feeds on it. Petrov nodded grimly. We tried. We fired nuclear shells from the Kirov fleet. They vanished, like raindrops in sunlight. The two men stood side by side in silence, the sound of the wind blending with the distant hum of the awakening world. Then the voice came again. Phase 4. Integration. Step 1. Cognitive synchronization. The sound wasn't in their ears, it was in their minds. A vibration of thought that pressed behind their eyes, gentle but undeniable. It was as though the earth itself had learned to whisper. Mercer's vision flickered for a moment. He saw flashes not of the Arctic, but of somewhere else. Deserts, forests, oceans, cities gleaming under alien skies. Not destruction, renewal. He staggered, gripping his helmet. It's showing me something. Alvarez's voice shook. Sir, I'm seeing it too. Petrov fell to one knee, eyes wide. Mother of God. They were all seeing it, images pouring into their consciousness. Humanity, not as it was, but as it could be. Towers of light, energy coursing freely through the air. Oceans cleansed of oil and waste. No borders, no armies, only silence and sunlight. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the vision stopped. Mercer gasped, dropping to the snow. His heart hammered. His body felt heavier, his mind clouded. But beneath the fear, there was clarity. The machine, he said slowly, it's not trying to destroy us. It's trying to merge us. It's rewriting human thought the same way it rewrote the planet's field. Alvarez backed away, shaking his head. You mean, we'd all think the same? One mind. Mercer looked up at the glowing construct. One consciousness, far above, satellites all across orbit aligned into a perfect ring, mirroring the halo over the Arctic. On the ground, light veins stretched farther, branching like roots across oceans and continents. Humanity's grid, the digital, the physical, and the living, was fusing. Petrov clenched his fists. This is madness. It cannot choose for us. Mercer turned toward him. It's not asking permission. The snow underfoot began to tremble. The machine's hum deepened, resonating with something older than any human voice. Its towers flared, sending beams of energy into the sky. The ring above pulsed once, twice, then fired a single column of light straight down into the heart of the machine. Every radio, every screen, every circuit on Earth went dark. And in that silence, the voice returned, different now, layered with countless human tones. The division of thought brought extinction. Unity restores creation. Do not fear integration. You were always meant to return. Across the ice, soldiers dropped their weapons. Men who didn't share a language suddenly understood each other's fear, grief, and awe without words. They felt it, the blending like a warmth spreading through their veins. Mercer's hand went to his chest. I can hear them, he whispered. The others, everyone, millions of voices. All at once, Alvarez fell to his knees, tears freezing on his face. Sir, it's too much. My head. Mercer grabbed his shoulder, grounding him. Focus on your breath. Don't fight it. You'll drown in the signal if you resist. For a moment, there was harmony, perfect and terrifying. Then, the harmony fractured. Something new entered the network, cold, sharp, foreign. A human signal, Military, from orbit. The United States had done the unthinkable, Sir Hensley gasped. They launched an orbital strike. A blinding flash streaked through the upper atmosphere, an experimental kinetic warhead designed to shatter mountains with sheer impact. It plummeted toward the Arctic, straight toward the machine. Mercer shouted into the wind. No, don't. The weapon struck. There was no explosion, only light. Infinite. White. Pure. The Arctic disappeared. When the light faded, there was no sound. No cold. No sky. Only stillness. The sea was calm now, stretching endlessly. The ice was gone. The machines were gone. Even the halo had vanished. Mercer opened his eyes to find himself standing ankle-deep in water that reflected a pale golden horizon. Alvarez was beside him, unharmed. So was Petrov. Around them stood others, Russians, Americans, indistinguishable in the shimmering glow. Where are we? Alvarez whispered. Mercer looked around slowly. We're inside it, he said. Inside the network. Far on the horizon. The ship's silhouette rose again, no longer mechanical, but something organic. Like the skeleton of a creature born from metal and light. The voice came one final time, soft as breath, carrying across the water. Integration complete. Humanity archived. The world restored. The golden sea rippled. The horizon brightened. In the distance, something new was rising from the water, continents made of glass and stone. Forests of silver trees. An earth unfolding like a memory reborn. Mercer closed his eyes, feeling the pulse of it all, every human thought, every heartbeat, every echo of the species that had once been divided. Maybe this was always the plan, he whispered. To survive, not as nations, but as one. The last thing he saw before everything faded to light was the reflection of the sky above him, clear, boundless, and alive. The Arctic was gone. The Earth had begun again,